just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
You're tuned in to the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. Today we're doing an overview of the quarterback class. Joining me, Joe DeLeone, is Ryan Roberts. And welcome back to the show. Special appearance for Mr. Alex Gilstrap. Alex, how are we doing, man?
Man, doing good. Obviously, work got the best of me going into the 2022 draft cycle. So starting it clean here, starting the 2023 draft season, and kind of have a little bit better work-life balance. I figured it out.
Well, Joe, can I say on March 4th, right? May 4th. May the 4th be with you. I watched Return of the Jedi. This morning I watched The Return of the Gilstrap. It is happening today.
So
sir.
stupid.
That was
so corny.
What?
What?
That I don't.
All right, I'm out.
Can we just end the show after that? Ryan, man, I make ham-fisted references all the time on the FCS show, but man, that was
good, man. You don't know what you're talking about. That is a premier dad joke that just happened for you guys.
I'm praying for you, man. That's all I gotta
pray for Juliet.
No, I'm praying for you.
Fair.
Well, I mean, we got Alex back, and we're going to be doing these position overviews with Alex, and whenever Alex is available, he'll be coming on. And the show is obviously progressing as it is continually done each season. The YouTube channel, actually, I think is about to hit 1,400 subscribers. Hopefully we get a little more money coming in. We can buy Alex a ring light so he's better lighting in his.
Oh, so you were the one with the bad lighting, and now it's me.
Yeah, I have like all this bright lighting in my room now.
Joe's just in an insane asylum with the white walls. That's
yeah,
I know. I need to get a backdrop. So we're talking quarterback class today. We've done a couple. Ryan and I have done a couple like comparison shows. But we haven't done like a full overview, and we've got some interesting points that we're going to bring up with this quarterback class. Before we do, though, I just want to tell you folks about today's sponsor, which of course is BetOnline. And if you have some better luck than me and you don't get your first hit on first leg of a parlay right with the Bucks winning last night, but then you fail to get the Warriors to actually play a competitive game, maybe you've got some actually good luck and you want to make some bets, head on over to BetOnline. Find all the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA and NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so head to their website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, boys, let's talk some quarterbacks. So before we get into talking about the way that we were going to approach this is talking about a guy that we all like that maybe not everyone is really that high on, and then somebody that we don't understand the hype for, that people are maybe not hyping up, but have a general appeal for and are considering them to be within maybe the top 10 range of the group. But I want to outline this quarterback class, and this quarterback class is going to get so much discussion throughout the whole process because of how bad last year's was. And all you would hear even during last cycle was just wait till the 2023 class. If you're a team that needs a quarterback, wait until the next class. And here we are. Now we're at that next class. There are a lot of options. There are a lot of different flavors that you can get in this quarterback group. You've got smaller guys that are really accurate like Bryce Young. You've got tall, big body guys like KJ Jefferson and DJ Uiagelelei. There are a lot of different options that you can go with here if you're a team looking for a quarterback. And there really is a possibility that we might see 5 guys drafted or more in next year's class after we have this market overcorrection for quarterbacks.
Man, let's slow the roll a little bit, Joseph. Let's slow the roll.
No.
We talked about this yesterday, and Alex, I would love your insight to this if you agree with me. I think that this class right now is kind of reminiscent of the 2022 group. The difference is that there's 2 quarterbacks up top that you can get a lot more excited about. But the rest of the group, I think, is very developmental. Very developmental. Like if that class last year that we just saw with Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, those types of cats had a Bryce Young and a CJ Stroud up top, it'd be the same class. So I'm not buying into that there's 5
Okay.
potential first-round picks. I'm buying in that there's 2 guys you feel better about at the top of the class, and then there's a lot of question marks. But with question marks, there could be people that exceed your expectations, or they could be people that fall flat on their face.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. I mean, of course, right now we're talking about this class as if it's a 2-horse race for the number 1 overall pick. CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. But we've learned year in and year out, there's going to be somebody, and we're going to talk about some of these names, I'm sure. Will Levis, there could be an Anthony Richardson, there could be a Tyler Van Dyke, Tanner McKee, some people believe, are going to propel themselves forward to get at least in that conversation, to be in that top 10, top 15. So do I think right now there's 5 first-round quarterbacks in this year's class? No, but we have a whole nother year of the cycle before these guys declare, or some of these guys declare, and I think by that point, we could see 4 or 5 guys in first-round consideration.
So I understand the thought process with that, but it's not so much a pushback, but I think
Quarrel. Say quarrel. It's a great word.
I wouldn't even say quarrel. Like, I don't disagree with it, but where we were at last year at the beginning of the 2022 cycle, it was a lot of, if some of these guys take a step forward this year, it'll be easier to project them to go in the first round. That didn't happen.
Sure.
And the guy who went in the first round was a total wild card who wasn't even brought up at the beginning of the cycle, just because he was average enough to go to a team that needed a quarterback. I would argue that we have more options for guys to take that step forward after this upcoming season. It felt like there were a lot less options during the last cycle. Am I off base there?
I wouldn't say off base. I'd say, I mean, a couple of guys that I was excited about last summer were Spencer Rattler, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit today. And I was a big proponent of Phil Dracovic. Phil Dracovic was a guy that obviously got injured, was not a guy that was able to make the jump because of that injury. And Spencer Rattler, I mean, right now I feel like everyone's trying to paint Will Levis as this big breakout guy, like we kind of painted Rattler as being. But that makes me uneasy. I mean, a little bit, because Levis's year that he just had was not even close to this redshirt freshman year that Spencer Rattler had in comparison. But I mean, I think it depends, Joe. Like, there's always risers, like Alex said. Like, there's a Kenny Pickett that rises. But I think it's about getting the right guys to rise, because for instance, like, I think in this class, it's like if a Devin Leary has a big rise, right? A kid that I like, but like the tools aren't great, right? And the same thing with Kenny Pickett. The tools weren't great. But if you get a guy like a Will Levis that takes a step, and Anthony Richardson, some of these guys that are extremely talented, then I think that's the difference between why these classes could be a little bit different. It's just there's too much potential with downfall to me right now. Like, it's tough to buy into a Will Levis right now, because he could be Spencer Rattler, where he just falls completely on his face and isn't the guy. And then what if an injury happens? But I think that you make some valid points in the sense that I think there's more volume. I think there is more guys, because you could talk me into right now Will Levis being the 3rd quarterback. You can talk me into Anthony Richardson if he has a season to be the 3rd quarterback. You can talk me into a bunch of different guys that have that potential. And last year, I feel like you had Spencer Rattler, and then you had a mix of Sam Howell, Carson Strong, like that type of group. And unfortunately, Strong has that injury that causes him to go undrafted. Sam Howell takes regression. So I feel like every possible negative that could have happened in 2022 did happen from a quarterback perspective outside of Kenny Pickett. I really didn't think anybody took a step forward. So just major projection makes me a little uneasy.
Another point I'll make with when you're talking about the depth of the class, I think last year we were relying a lot on, juniors to take that step forward and then declare when it came time for that. Because we didn't have a lot of those take that next step, there's a lot of seniors in this year's class. I mean, I'm just going down of course, Dracovic is someone you mentioned. Hendon Hooker, someone I know y'all have talked about on a previous episode. Devin Leary, you mentioned. Will Levis. The list goes on and on, all the way down to like Jaden Daniels, someone that was, people really, really liked going into last year's cycle. And of course, transferring to LSU this year, he could take the next step if he wins that job over Miles Brennan.
Which he sounds like he's going to.
Right. I mean, the talent's there.
Let's hope, man.
Yeah.
I do feel bad about Miles Brennan. Just a quick side note. Like they were like, they kind of sold him on like, oh, come back. And then they go to the portal for James Daniels. It's like, that's kind of messed up, man.
That's Brian Kelly for you.
Oh, different conversation. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
No, I was just bringing up some of the names. So I think this year we are going to get that for sure middle group. of prospects that, we're still waiting on that next step forward for some of these guys. But I mean, I think there's a good floor in the Keaton Slovis, in the Devin Leary, in the Hendon Hooker, Phil Dracovic. I think we're going to get a lot of guys that we feel comfortable day two, with some guys that we're still waiting on that next step forward. And that's the reason they didn't declare earlier, that are going to be in this year's class because they are a senior now.
So I figured a really interesting way, instead of saying like, oh, our guy, like we always get that with draft evaluation, is saying like, oh, who's our guy in this class? I thought of a more fun discussion is talking about a guy that we're way too high on. And what I mean by that is somebody that we like, that we probably really shouldn't that much, but we want to talk about them anyway. So I want to go with my guy first. And I said I didn't want to say my guy, and here we are. I'm already saying it. The player I picked for this category is DJ Uiagelelei from Clemson. So I have valid reasoning for this. Last year, he was terrible. He was really, really bad. He looked really good as a freshman. But last year, his statistics were horrible. I think he threw 9 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, or it was the reverse of that.
You're right. He had more interceptions than touchdowns. Keep going.
It was not a very good season for DJ Uiagelelei. And I think if you look at his physical profile, I think if you look at why he was so highly regarded as a recruit, and you remember some of those things, and then take a look at the issues that he was having last year, the context to me at least gives me some hope that he could rise if things are better this upcoming year. He's got a new offensive coordinator, but the reasoning, if you look back to what happened to him last year, he was playing in an offense that had a bunch of big, clunky, slow receivers. And because of that, they had no deep threat options for him to throw to. And a lot of the play calling was all of these short route concepts. And more often than not, those slow, big guys were just not getting open. And I felt like when I was watching him, I was watching a guy who was visibly frustrated. Alex, we were talking beforehand, and you were saying it looked like he had the yips. He looked like he was in his own head, but at the same time trying to do too much. And as these games would progress and guys weren't getting open, it's not like you could take the top off of a defense and open things up. That just never happened in the games that I watched for him. And I just wonder if things are a little bit different this year with the new offensive coordinator. I don't know for sure if any deep threats have emerged in that receiver group. We're going to have to see in the first couple games this season. But if this offense could spread out a little bit more, I think DJ could do a lot better. It just felt like he was in such a position to fail. And if we remember back to what he did as a true freshman and how good he was as a recruit, if he's in a better position to succeed, I would not be shocked if we're talking about him at the end of the cycle as a guy who's a riser.
I mean, I hope it happens. I mean, I think the biggest point that you made was an offensive system change, because I felt like they still thought they had Trevor Lawrence back there playing last year, man. Like, we're doing quarterback run game and asking a lot of him from an off-script perspective. And that's just not DJ, man. That's not his game. Like, he's a sufficient athlete, but he's not a great athlete. Like, he's a solid athlete, and he's a deep ball thrower. He needs to be in a vertical-based offense, like you said. Let him have some time back there. And I think another big point is that his offensive line was bad last year. Like, it was really bad. And they didn't lose anybody of significance last year. So you hope with a year under everyone's belt, Walker Parks and that group can kind of get things turned around a little bit. You would hope. So I'm hoping for DJ. I think the only thing that makes me a little hesitant on it is because I don't know if the wide receiver group is going to be that much better. They still they lost Justin Ross, but they still have Joe Ngata and Bo Collins and those guys who are still the same profile. Like, they're both all 6'3 plus, not burners, big body catch point dudes. And so is that going to change? Again, I'm hoping that it's going to be better for DJ. But my last thing that makes me worried about that one, Joe, is that they have a 5-star freshman quarterback coming in too, who, if you watch the spring game, he looked so much better than DJ. And again, that's apple to oranges a little bit because they're not playing against the same defense, right? But I'm just a little worried about that one, man. A little worried about him.
Yeah, definitely a high risk pick there. I mean, he could not even start come week one.
Joe's a gambler.
Yeah.
Bet
I am
online.
Throw it on
gambler.
green, right? All on
Exactly.
green. No, I mean, he has obviously. We talked about this guy when he came in for Trevor Lawrence in 2020 for those couple weeks when he was out due to COVID. And look, the physical tools are there, and he's played well to where we were talking about this guy as this year's class that we're talking about. It's number 1 overall pick. And of course, this was before the Bryce Young breakout and CJ Stroud, coming into his own last year. But this guy has what it takes to be a top round pick, but last year was really, really bad. And he's going to have to come back to form of what we saw in glimpses against Notre Dame and in 2020, where he played really well against that defense. And, I'm not sure if what that's going to look like. Of course, like you both mentioned, the offensive coordinator change could pay huge dividends for him as and his outcome for this upcoming season. But he just has a long bridge of trust to build back for people that are evaluating him.
Can we talk about for a second how Tony Elliott was a terrible offensive coordinator and somehow got the head coaching job at Virginia?
Well, because that's not a difficult job to get, is it?
What? It's an ACC
It's
school.
It's an okay job, but it's one of those jobs where it's an academic school, so it's like it's not easy to recruit at. Like, he's going to do fine there. They're going to be an average team, and that's all you need with UVA.
I think that program is going to go to hell, to be honest. I think they're going to be fun next year because they got Brendan Armstrong, who we haven't talked about at all, Dontavian Wicks, who's a really talented wide receiver. Billy Kemp, I think, is still there at wide receiver. They got some dudes, and they're going to throw the football a lot next year. But after that, it's going to get a little ugly, I think, for Tony Elliott and the Virginia Cavaliers. I think it's going to get a little ugly, man.
Speaking of some new scenery for a different face.
Speaking of ugly, go ahead.
No. Oh, that's not what I was going for. I'm just saying. Well, I guess some might consider this player to be ugly, but Alex, who's your guy that you're really high on?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say don't put really high. My guy that I'm going to talk about is Spencer Rattler, and I'm hesitant in talking about him because we were burned on him last year. Obviously, coming into last year's cycle, he was looked at as the Bryce Young, CJ Stroud of that year's class, being the number 1 overall pick, and it was his to lose, and he lost it. He played pretty poorly down the stretch, and of course, as everyone knows, got his job taken by the younger Caleb Williams at Oklahoma. Spencer Rattler has now transferred to South Carolina, which I think was a good spot for him. It keeps the level of competition up, but it puts him in a more, he doesn't have the national championship or the Heisman hope that he did at Oklahoma, and kind of takes the pressure off of him a little bit. So I think the change of scenery could be really, really fruitful for Spencer Rattler. I think the talent is still obviously there, and I think Spencer Rattler is one of those players that, from an evaluating standpoint, from the NFL draft perspective, we've all just kind of written off. He had a rough start to last season, and obviously the expectations were super high, and maybe he just didn't respond well to those high expectations that he had. And I think because expectations have come back down to earth, maybe he kind of takes the stress off of his level of play, and he just plays better, plays with the level of play that we expect out of someone like Spencer Rattler with his skill set and his obviously high octane tools that he has at times. So I think Spencer Rattler is someone that has a lot, much like DJ Uiagelelei, he has a bridge of trust to build back for those that are evaluating him. But I think Spencer Rattler's in a good situation in South Carolina where he can focus on winning over the locker room, growing as an individual, because I think there are some question marks about his character and his leadership. But I think he has a good just reset. He gets to put the reset button on. He gets to play a little bit more loose without those high expectations that he had going into last season. And I think this is someone that could, if he plays, above the level of competition, if he plays well against the Georgias and the Floridas going into this year, of course they're going to play. I think this is someone that can turn heads and put himself back into at least the first round consideration because I think he has that level of talent.
Yeah, I mean, this is for me, Joe, honestly. I'd say no one has ever questioned the talent of a Spencer Rattler. He's got a live arm. He's very accurate too. I mean, his thing has been decision-making and just the kind of character stuff that Alex talked about a little bit. I think it was a big step for his character, though. The fact that, obviously he had a relationship with Shane Beamer, who was the head coach for South Carolina that was at Oklahoma previously. But I think it says a lot about maybe some growth there that he said, I need to get out of the spotlight a little bit. I need to go to South Carolina because you cannot convince me that other big programs did not want to take a shot on Spencer Rattler. He chose to go to South Carolina.
Look, I get that, and I don't mean to cut you off, but if you really wanted to get out of the spotlight, he would have gone to Bowling Green. Like South Carolina is an SEC program. They've been good before. They're a competitive team, and if you have the right players, they can be competitive in the SEC. It's a decent program. It's not like we're talking about Duke here. Like it's a good team, and they just got they also brought Austin Stogner with them. Like I don't think that like it's like he's stepping out of the spotlight. It still has attention on it because it's an SEC team.
I mean, the spot. Well, yeah. I mean, you're comparing an SEC team, though. He's coming from a Big 12 team, and I think we can all agree that the SEC is a much better conference than the Big 12. The fact of the matter is that South Carolina doesn't have the same notoriety as an Oklahoma or some other schools. I mean, just doesn't.
Obviously, I think a lot of that decision he made was based off of the fact that he knew that Beamer was his guy and that he could trust him to come in and start right away. He didn't want to get beat out.
Let me ask you. We mentioned Jaden Daniels a little bit, right? About him going from Arizona State to LSU. That happens pretty recently. You're telling me that maybe LSU wasn't calling up Spencer Rattler to come play at LSU. I still think that he lands into a pretty good situation and he's a little bit out of the spotlight. I really do.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. He is more out of the spotlight, but like I think if he really wanted to do that, he would have gone somewhere. I think it was more off of him wanting to go somewhere where he knew he could start because he didn't want to get beat out again.
Right, but you don't want him to go that far down to a Bowling Green because then if he
that's hyperbole.
I know, but he still wants to play in a competitive atmosphere to where when he hopefully plays well and it shows improvement, it has more notoriety behind it. It has more behind it than if he were to go beat up on some Maction schools or Mountain West. Those like. Going and playing in the SEC at a lower tier school of the SEC, yeah, South Carolina is a relevant program. They could even push for top 25 consideration every few years as they have, but it doesn't come like Ryan. You made a good point with LSU. LSU is not very good right this second. They had an off couple years now, but that's still that LSU moniker carries more weight than South Carolina, and there's going to be more national television, stuff like that. Spencer Rattler gets to kind of sit back, play against a Georgia and a Florida without the expectation to potentially win that game. But if he at least goes in there and shows that he plays at a decently high level of play, that's gonna carry more weight than going to LSU, and people are going to talk about, well, Spencer Rattler still can't do it against the Georgias and the Floridas and the Alabamas.
Well, this is my thing, Joe. I felt like there was going to be two ways that Spencer Rattler was going to go with the transfer. One, he was going to go to a Auburn or like some, slightly down tier of an SEC school, which I guess he still is at technically, or he was going to go back home to Arizona. And I feel like if he went back to Arizona, I would have been like, yup, he's Spencer Rattler. He needs to be comfortable, right? But I don't know. I think it's a good fit. We'll see how it works out.
And he could have gone to Arizona State too, but it ends up being Emory Jones who does that. But here's my issue with Spencer Rattler as a prospect. I genuinely think he's soft, separate from what we were just talking about. It shows up to me on tape. Like there's been always these questions of who he is as a young man and as a leader and all that stuff. And it really shows up to me on tape. Like I see a guy that is really not willing to take contact at all. Like he looks visibly afraid of taking contact. And I know that he's a thin, smaller quarterback. He's not that big. We were saying he's like 6'1", very light frame. In addition to that though, like I watch him handle pressure, and I just don't think he handles it very well at all. Like he kind of freaks out. And the other thing as well is whenever he's sitting there reading the play in front of him and making decisions, like I think he does a fine job of that, but he does this horrible thing where he drifts backwards. And we were talking before the show how a lot of smaller quarterbacks tend to do that so they can see better. But the reason why that's a negative and why you shouldn't drift backwards as a quarterback, and this is a bad habit you can obviously work on, but it's still concerning to see it on tape, is that if an edge rusher is coming off the edge and you're stepping backwards, you're shortening the amount of distance that this edge rusher who's coming off the shoulder of an offensive tackle has to travel to get to you. The reason why quarterbacks step up in the pocket is it forces those edge rushers to redirect. So when you're drifting back like that to me was causing problems, and I just don't like the way that he handles himself. I'm not a fan of guys that don't know how to handle and assess pressure.
And guys that drift also, it's going to affect arm strength to a degree, right? Because you're not obviously on your platform and you're fading backwards, and that's not going to help arm strength as well. But Spencer, of course, is a guy that has a really strong arm, so that has not been a big hindrance for him in that department.
Yeah, just the last thing on this too is like having watched what Daniel Jones has done. I would argue that a lot of times the guys that don't know how to handle themselves when they're getting pressured like that, it very often it's hard to coach it out of them. It's really tough. All right, Ryan, who's your guy?
My guy, it was almost Keaton Slovis. It was almost. But I need to see it. I need to see it at Pittsburgh first. And he just lost Jordan Addison. It was in the transfer portal. So not great start for Keaton Slovis there, but I have hopes for him. I do have hopes. The guy that I picked, Joe, is a guy that we talked about a couple episodes ago. I like Hendon Hooker, man. I do. I really do. I thought his tape at Tennessee last year was very, very good. I really did think it was good. I thought it was good enough where he could have declared in that draft and been a day 2 quarterback. I still think that could have happened because he is 6'3 plus, 220 plus pounds, 10 plus inch hands, like 10 and a half inch hands. He hits all those thresholds. He's a really good athlete. He didn't turn the ball over much last year. He had a really nice season for Tennessee. I think the arm is plus. I think everything from a physical perspective is plus. I think he's pretty accurate too. I mean, one of the more accurate quarterbacks that I've watched so far in this cycle. It's just always been about consistency with Hendon Hooker. I mean, at Virginia Tech, there were flashes, but he was just in a tough situation and with that coaching staff where I felt like they didn't take advantage of the skill set that he had. And I felt like the Tennessee staff did last year. I thought Josh Heupel and that staff did a really good job using Hendon Hooker. And I'm looking at this class where people are falling in love with Will Levis. People are falling in love with, and I am very hopeful for Anthony Richardson to be a guy in Florida. But people are falling in love with these Tulsi quarterbacks. And I don't understand why we're not talking about Hendon Hooker a lot. I understand that he is going to be a 25-year-old rookie, but Will Levis is also going to be a 24-year-old rookie. It's not like he's much younger than Hendon Hooker. So I think that people need to start talking about him more. I might be too high, but I see a lot of talent there, man. I just think he's very talented. I really do.
You know, prepping for this show, I didn't know if we were going to go into top fives, but Hendon Hooker for me is in that conversation at the very least. I think he played with I know the question with him has been consistency throughout his career at Virginia Tech, and going over to Tennessee, I thought this guy's played a lot better, just game in and game out. I just really liked what I saw on tape from Hendon Hooker when watching him the other day. And look, I think Hendon Hooker right now is someone that I'm willing to put in the top 5. I think he's on the back half of that top 5 right now at the position. I think, like you said, you mentioned skill set, obviously has a good, not great arm. He's definitely NFL caliber in that regard. He has the athleticism, and I think he did improve, which I think I weigh very heavily in summer scouting. I want to see someone that projectively got better and better as his career has gone on, if he's played multiple years. And I think we've gotten that with Hendon Hooker. And yes, I know now he's very mature as a college athlete, being 25 years old, and I expect him to, play really well. And I think Tennessee's going to be in some football games that years prior they have not been in. Let's go back to South Carolina with Spencer Rattler, the Georgias and the Floridas, that they're going to fight in the for that division. I think Hendon Hooker at this point is playing at the level that I think that he can compete in those football games. And I think he has a skill set to be an NFL quarterback. So I think this is someone that you're looking at on day 2 as kind of almost a lock. I think he's going to be a Senior Bowl guy. I think this is a day 2 quarterback.
His film is way better than Desmond Ritter's from last year.
Absolutely.
I'll just leave it at that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just to wrap up Hendon Hooker, because I think you guys all hit the nail on the head. I think we all agree that Hooker is a fantastic player. I haven't really rounded out a top 5 or anything.
Mm-hmm.
There's like 2 more guys that I want to watch before I put together any type of a ranking. But I just think with Hooker, he's got that experience now as more of a starter, and I would like to see what he does as a full-time starter. The age thing does legitimately concern me. I think at the very least he'd probably be top 6. Which is, it says a lot. And I think that by the end of this year, if he cleans up just a couple of things, he very well, like you just said, Alex, could be a day 2 guy. He has that developmental upside. I was super impressed, as we talked about on that comparison show, with his deep ball accuracy, which some of these guys tend to struggle with. a lot of guys I've noticed from this class don't know how to have a lot of touch on these deep balls, especially like Will Levis, who we compared him to. But I think that is very promising if he can just improve some of that decision making and some of those shorter throws that he tends to miss on. All right, guys, let's talk about guys that we just don't get the appeal for. So it's not that we're saying we're completely out or we hate them. My guy, I think I'm completely out on, but it's a player that we feel has been getting just generally too much positive recognition. And part of that, there's always the box score scouting that starts right now where people just throw out names and then we start to watch the tape and then we start to evaluate and make some decisions. I don't think there's going to be any pushback on this one. But Taulia Tagovailoa, the Maryland starting quarterback, previously at Alabama, brother of the weak-armed Miami starting quarterback. Please tell me you guys saw that clip that they posted to Tua.
What, the duck? The duck to Tyreek Hill?
It looked like he was fielding a punt. But besides that, I've watched Taulia, and he is somebody who keeps getting brought up. Is he gonna be like a sleeper pick? It just like keeps I'll see it pop up here and there. And after watching like half of a game of him, I did watch the second game. I was immediately out on him. I didn't see any decision-making, really any coherent decision-making from him. He is a fantastic athlete. Like he might be like a 4.5 guy. Like I don't think that's a stretch. And he's thin. He's not that big, but he's a really, really good athlete. And he is very good when he improvises. But I see a guy that improvises way too much. He aimlessly wanders. And again, there are a lot of throws where I was watching him like, who are you throwing to? What was the decision there? Like, what are we thinking here? I don't think he handles pressure all that well as well. And that's something to me that always bugs the hell out of me with quarterbacks. But just overall, I don't see anything that makes sense. Good athlete, but nothing else does it for me.
He's going to put up numbers next year too. If Demas, the wide receiver, comes back and they got Raheem Jarrett, he's going to put up some numbers.
And he's still going to get brought up because of the numbers in the box score scouting. But the guy is just not a good prospect.
I mean, and the fact that his brother was a top 5 pick, right? Like that's not going to hurt his causes at all. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, he's much more athlete than quarterback, right? Like he's pure improviser right now, which doesn't really translate. Like you have to be good in structure. Everything can't be outside of structure. So I agree with he's probably not even a draftable quarterback in my opinion right now. Like
Yeah, I think at best this is a late day 3. You're hoping that he's a good backup for you because he's going to put up numbers like you said. I was going to mention Dante Demas Jr. coming back from that knee injury. Was it knee or ankle? It was knee.
Something lower body.
Yeah, it was lower body. But yeah, I'm really high on some of the guys that he has in that offense. I just don't think Taulia. I remember watching him his first year. It would have been 2020, 2019. And of course, people wanted to watch him being Tua's brother. And looked at my dad after watching about a quarter of football. I said, this guy is not Tua. This guy is not it.
He's not Tua.
He's the complete opposite of him. It's funny because Tua, when he was at Alabama, was a little bit more calculated. He was a little bit more consistent. And he's just like, I have no idea what's going on. The ball is going to end up somewhere, and we're going to score a touchdown. That's the vibe that he had a game where he threw 5 interceptions. Like that is what you're likely going to get from him over the 5 touchdown games.
Yeah, I mean, it's like remember Matt Corral had that 6 and 5 interception game a couple years ago.
Yeah, right. Like that's not good.
No, it's not good.
That's a problem. Alex, who's your guy that you're not feeling?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a guy that I've seen in first round consideration in early mock drafts. He's way too early mocks, and that is Stanford's Tanner McKee. And McKee has great size. I mean, he's 6'5", 220, 215 pounds. This guy's an absolute unit, and he fits that prototype. He has good arm strength. I wouldn't say great arm strength, but he has good arm strength. There's 3 things I wrote down when kind of looking into Tanner McKee a little bit more that makes me hesitant. First thing, let's go back to what Carson Strong had to deal with, the knee injury. Tanner McKee, there is some undisclosed, they're not really talking about too much, knee injury that put him out in some scenarios going into the end of last season. And it kind of continues to be a question mark. He's wearing a brace and all that. So that, especially after seeing Carson Strong dip as far to undrafted, Carson Strong did not deserve to be undrafted based on his level of talent. So obviously the knee issue is something that the NFL is, taking into consideration quite a bit. Other thing I put here, and I touched on it at the beginning, and that is the number of seniors we have in this class. And Tanner McKee being a junior, I don't buy that this guy is necessarily going to be in this draft class. I think we have a number of seniors in this year's class that are going to, obviously be in this year's draft that are going to be at least in the same tier as Tanner McKee, that I think he may wait it out another year, maybe get healthy, get right, and hopefully wait for a lesser quarterback class going into 2024. And then the last note I wrote here is the fact that he just got worse over the course of the season, which I take a lot of value in. I touched on this with Hendon Hooker when commenting on Ryan's selection. I value when in summer scouting the ability to get better week over week. From week 1 to week 13, I want to see improvement. I want to see you get better. And I felt like in Tanner McKee's case, he got worse. I think as the year went on, he tapered off his level of play, his decision making. It seemed like he all around just got a little bit worse. I think he had the last 5 games of the season, he had more interceptions than touchdowns and didn't have a lot of touchdowns overall. And I think if you watch the tape on a couple of those last games that I watched, he just didn't look as comfortable. Some of that may be due to the knee injury, which again just doesn't help his case, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, he's an interesting player because he actually went on an LDS, I almost said LSD mission, LDS mission.
What a mission!
What a mission.
One is very different than the other. One is drugs. One is church.
Very different. So he served that for 2 years in Brazil, I think, if I remember correctly, and then he came back, and like Alex said, he's kind of struggled a little bit with that knee, and there's some flashes, man. He's a big guy with a pretty good arm, and I actually think he's an okay athlete for his size, which is kind of weird for being 6'5", 220 something, whatever he is. So he's more of a wait and see guy for me. I'm definitely I'm not putting him in a first round mock draft anytime soon. Like, that's ridiculous, but we'll see on him. I mean, I don't feel great about it just because Stanford, I mean, has quietly been an absolute mess over the last 3 to 4 years. They've been awful since Bryce Love had that injury that his final year. They've just been awful since, man. Like, it's been crazy. So I don't feel great about what's around him, but he's a wait and see guy for me.
I admittedly, he and Devin Leary are the two guys that I still have to watch. So I honestly don't have much on him.
You didn't watch Devin Leary, man? Devin Leary is
I was going to watch him last.
Great.
I was going to watch him last night, but I ended up spending more time on Tyler Van Dyke. We also don't have any freaking Stanford tape, so I don't know where the hell you guys are. Were you guys watching YouTube?
Things called cut-ups, baby.
Well, I don't like using the YouTube version, but I can't be picky.
You got to do what you got to do sometimes, man.
Right. So I wait to do those guys. I'm waiting to do those guys until the end because I don't like watching the broadcast tape. But separate from that, Ryan,
you're so bougie, man.
I know. I'm spoiled now that I have access to the.
You should have been watching tape in 2019.
Yeah,
2018. That's all cut ups.
those are dark times.
I remember back in those days before I knew Jesse Fritsch. I used to watch the videos that he posted on his YouTube channel before it got completely taken down. I thought it was so cool that I was interacting with him, but now I realize he's just a total goof. But I love you, Jesse. We absolutely love you.
He doesn't listen to the show anyway. It's fine.
I know he doesn't. Ryan, you're a guy.
Yep.
I can't say anything too negatively on Alex. I'll tell you why after. But I don't say that I disagree.
Yeah. Look, man, this is the guy for me right now. Tyler Van Dyke from Miami has been talked about a ton in this class, and it's the box score thing, right? Because he had, I think, 6 straight games with 300+ yards and 3 touchdowns. So, he's got the
stupid stats.
He steadied the quarterback room for Miami after De'Ara King got hurt, and you were just kind of like, "What's next?" type of thing. And Tyler Van Dyke said, "I'm next," and I get it. I see when I watch Tyler Van Dyke a not very athletic quarterback who's a pure pocket kid, which is fine. I liked Carson Strong a lot, and he was a pure pocket kid. No, nothing against that. I think he gets billed as this rocket-armed quarterback, and I don't think he has a very strong arm at all. I actually think it's kind of middling at best. I don't think he has a strong arm. And then the processing for me is the worst thing right now. Like, Carson Strong was such a quick processor because I'm going to compare those players because they're similar. But the thing is that Carson Strong had a much stronger arm. and he processed really quickly and didn't make bad decisions. I started with the Florida State game with Tyler Van Dyke, and man,
that was
rough.
a mistake because that was a bad game. He had
it was a damper on expectations quick.
Right, I made the mistake too. That was the game that I watched because that was the one that we had in the
but Joe, that's one of the worst things though, man. It's like when you start with a game, because he had 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards that game. That's one of his more statistically better games. And it was bad, man. Like, it was a bad game, like just late and throwing balls errantly into coverage. And it was just, I'm just out on Tyler Van Dyke for now, man. Maybe he takes a step forward and maybe his arm's stronger than I'm giving him credit for. But right now, I don't see it with him, man. I just really don't, especially in first round mocks. Like, nah, I'm good, man.
Yeah, I definitely think some of the talk on Twitter for Tyler Van Dyke is a little elevated for what he deserves at this point. I think I might not be quite as low as you right now on his arm strength. I think he has fine arm strength, like good arm strength. Obviously not an athlete, but yes, like you said, like this guy just processes the game at a slower rate. And look, it was his first year with the reins, so maybe that improves. I'm willing to hold out hope. That's why I didn't put him down. But I definitely do think we need to dampen expectations for Tyler Van Dyke, because I think he might fall into that trap of never being able to fulfill the expectations that we have for him right now.
Alex, I agree with you on that because he does actually, like, if you consider back to it, he has limited experience as a starter, and he's been there for a decent amount of time because he's going to be draft eligible after playing half a season as a starter because Derek King was there. And they also were operating in a much different offense when Derek was there because they're two vastly different quarterbacks because one's tiny and one's massive. So I'm at least like holding out hope that processing catches up to speed and the new offense that Mario Cristobal is bringing in is going to help elevate him and help his performance. So I'm not going to completely say like, oh, I'm done with this kid, but I'm not putting him in the top 5 of the guys that I've watched. I'm not putting him in the first round discussion until he proves himself, and he still has a decent amount to prove. I think it's going to wrap us up on, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit subscribe button on the YouTube channel or the audio feed if you're tuning in on audio. Talk to you later at Joe DeLeone, at Alex Gilstrap, at Rise and Draft, and at NFL Prospect.